Before the British Empire stretched across a quarter of the world, before the Union Jack waved over India, Africa, and half the Caribbean, England was just a damp, bickering island with dodgy plumbing and a taste for ale. Imagine you're sitting in a pub in London in the year 1500. Everyone's talking about wool, bread prices, and well, not much else. Then suddenly whispers start. Have you heard? England wants to go exploring like Spain and Portugal. Maybe we'll find gold, or maybe we'll just find more fish. That, my friends, is how the story of the British Empire begins. Not with a bang, not with fireworks, but with wool, ships, and a healthy dose of envy. Hello everyone, and welcome to our channel, Past in Parts, where history isn't boring, it's storytelling with a little mischief. Before we start, please hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you don't want to miss the drama, the battles, the bellyaches, and the bold adventures of the British Empire. Today we're starting our brand new series on the rise and fall of the British Empire. But before we get ahead of ourselves with redcoats and tea parties, let's rewind to where it all began, the Tudors and their first overseas adventures. Welcome to the Tudors, where kings had big bellies, queens had bigger personalities, and England started dreaming of an empire. From Henry VII's cautious baby steps onto the world stage, to Henry VII's obsession with ships and divorces, and Elizabeth I's firebrand reign where privateers turned piracy into national policy, we are setting sail on the empire's very first adventures. So grab your tea, maybe some biscuits, and let's dive in. Let's start at the end of the 15th century. Now, the 15th century was a messy time for England. There were civil wars, kings getting chopped, and people still arguing about which roses looked prettier, the red or the white ones. England has just come out of the Wars of the Roses, basically decades of nobles smacking each other around with swords until finally Henry Tudor grabs the throne and becomes Henry VII. Now Henry VII was not the most adventurous guy. He wasn't like Columbus, going let's cross the ocean and see what happens. Nope, Henry VII was a practical man. Think of him like the dad who says, no, we're not buying a speedboat, we're paying off the mortgage first. But even cautious Henry realized one thing: Spain and Portugal were striking gold, literally, with their voyages. Columbus had stumbled into the Americas. Vasco da Gama had found the sea route to India. England looked around and thought, well, we can't just sit here eating porridge while our neighbors are swimming in gold. We need ships, we need explorers, we need bragging rights. Enter Giovanni Cabot. Don't let the fancy Italian name fool you. In England, he was called John Cabot. He convinced Henry VII that if Spain could find new lands, England could too. And unlike Columbus, Cabot had a different idea: sail west, but a little further north. So in 1497, Cabot set off with a tiny ship called the Matthew, just one ship, about 18 men, and probably a whole lot of seasickness. After weeks of sailing, he spotted land. Congratulations, John, you've discovered Canada. Well, not gold, not spices, not silk, just lots of coastline and fish. Cabot came back to England saying, this place is swimming with cod, enough fish to feed all of Europe. The king was thrilled, not because of cod recipes, but because England had technically discovered something before France did. And in geopolitics, that's a win. Sadly, on Cabot's second trip, he disappeared. Poof, vanished. No one knows what happened. Maybe storms, maybe pirates, maybe just got lost. But the seed was planted. England had dipped its toes into overseas exploration. Fast forward to Henry VII, the man famous for having 6 wives, founding the Church of England, and looking like he ate 3 breakfasts every day. But beyond the wives and the drama, Henry VII was obsessed with ships. When he wasn't divorcing or executing someone, Henry VII was in the docks, pointing at boats like a kid in a candy shop. He built the Mary Rose, one of England's first big warships. In fact, he established the Royal Navy as a permanent force. He built the Mary Rose, pride of the fleet, which, fun fact, sank embarrassingly in 1545 during a battle. Hundreds drowned, their armor dragging them down like anchors. Grim, yes, but it showed how seriously Henry took naval power. For the first time, England was flexing at sea. Why does that matter? Because to explore, to colonize, to grab land overseas, you need ships. Henry VIII basically gave England the keys to future empire building by saying, "From now on, England is a sea power." Henry didn't actually go off colonizing himself. He was too busy fighting France and showing off in tournaments, but his navy laid the groundwork. By the time he died, England had stronger ships, trained sailors, and an itch to go adventuring. Think of Henry as the guy who buys all the camping gear but never actually goes camping. Still, the gear is there for the next person to use. Now let's skip to Elizabeth I, the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. By the time Elizabeth took the throne in 1558, she inherited a kingdom that was broke, religiously divided, and frankly insecure. Spain, on the other hand, was the global superpower. They had ships, gold, colonies everywhere, and England, still that island with rain. Elizabeth thought, why should Spain have all the fun? Let's annoy them. And thus began England's age of daring sailors. Elizabeth was clever. She knew England couldn't directly outspend Spain, but they could do something else, piracy, or as she liked to call it, privateering, which is basically piracy, but with a government permission slip. She gave licenses to daring sailors like Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, John Hawkins. These weren't just sailors, they were part-time explorers, part-time pirates, and full-time troublemakers. Their jobs? Attack Spanish ships, steal their gold, and bring it back to England. And boy, they delivered. Drake famously circumnavigated the globe, plundering as he went, and returned a hero. Elizabeth knighted him, basically saying, "Well done for stealing all that Spanish treasure. We'll definitely be using this to build more ships." Raleigh tried to plant colonies, and Hawkins, well, he got very rich in the slave trade, which is a dark chapter we'll get to later. Elizabeth's strategy was simple. If you can't beat Spain, at least steal their stuff. And it worked. English ships raided Spanish treasure fleets, captured gold, and brought it home. The Queen was thrilled, Spain was furious, and Europe started noticing England. Elizabeth's biggest experiment was trying to build colonies. Walter Raleigh got permission to set up a settlement in North America. The result? Roanoke, also known as the Lost Colony. At first, it looked promising. English families arrived, built homes, and planted crops, but life in the New World was tough. Supplies ran low, local relations were tricky, and when ships finally returned years later, the colony had vanished. Houses empty, people gone, only one word carved on a tree, Coatoan. To this day, no one knows what happened. Did they starve, move in with local tribes, get taken by aliens? Okay, maybe not aliens, but it was one of history's great mysteries. For England, though, it was a reminder, overseas empire was not going to be easy. Then came 1588. Spain, sick of England's piracy and Elizabeth's defiance, launched a massive fleet called the Spanish Armada to invade England. Imagine hundreds of ships, the biggest navy Europe had ever seen, sailing across the Channel. Elizabeth's England was outnumbered, outgunned, and probably out of snacks. But thanks to clever tactics, smaller, faster ships, and a bit of help from the weather, the English won. The Armada was defeated. Spain's pride was bruised, and England's reputation skyrocketed. This wasn't just a military victory, it was psychological. Suddenly, England saw itself as more than a small island. It was a player on the global stage. The road to empire had truly opened. By the time Elizabeth died in 1603, England hadn't built a massive empire yet. No India, no Africa, no Australia, but the foundations were there. A stronger navy, brave and reckless sailors, a taste for overseas adventure, and let's be honest, a love of stealing Spanish gold. The Tudors had turned England from a kingdom licking east wounds after civil war into a country looking out at the wider world. The empire wasn't born yet, but it was definitely kicking inside the womb. Think of it like this: the Tudors didn't build the empire, they built the toolbox. The hammer, the nails, the saw. The next rulers would use that toolbox to build something massive. Of course, let's not romanticize this too much. Early English ventures overseas weren't just brave explorers planting flags. They often meant seizing land from people who already lived there, taking resources, and spreading disease. For indigenous peoples across the Atlantic, European exploration often looked more like invasion. And while England was late to the game, they'd soon catch up in brutality. So let's recap Episode 1. England under the Tudors stopped being a squabbling medieval kingdom and started looking outward. Henry VII planted the first flag overseas. Henry VII built a navy that made it possible to dream big. And the merchants, they were ready to hustle their way to fortunes. England wasn't yet an empire, but the fuse had been lit. And that's where we leave it today. The Tudors, kings and queens who, between all the drama and beheadings, somehow set the stage for the biggest empire in history. Would you have joined one of those early voyages, or would you stay home with a nice warm bowl of stew? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love reading them. And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with a friend who thinks history is just dates and dust. Trust me, the drama has only just begun. Because next time we'll dive into Episode 2, the Elizabethan Age and Sea Power, where those small Tudor beginnings explode into a full-blown naval revolution. Spoiler alert, it involves sea dogs, stolen gold, and a whole lot of angry Spaniards. We'll see what happens when Elizabeth I turns exploration into England's favorite sport, with pirates, treasures, and a showdown with the mighty Spanish Armada. Grab your compass, pack a snack, and maybe bring sunscreen because Episode 2 is going to get spicy. You won't want to miss it. If you enjoyed this voyage through Tudor ambition, make sure you subscribe because the story is just getting started. In Episode 2, we'll meet the Elizabethan sea dogs, adventurers, smugglers, and occasional war criminals. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching. Bye.